tonight we have Vince LaMarca, and he's going to be talking about shaping lasting behavior change through the hot and cold game where you're getting warmer and warmer. His overview is some of the mightiest forms of change come from when we reward small improvements over time with shaping. This presentation will provide families with various practical examples and useful tips for implementing shaping to improve behaviors in both their child's and their own lives. I've looked at his PowerPoint. It's going to talk about some really important concepts like getting your kids to sleep better and eat more foods. And so with that, Vince, I look forward to hearing your talk. Thank you for coming tonight.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for inviting me. Again, my name is Vince LaMarca. I keep changing the names of this presentation just a little bit, but it's all about the hot and cold game and why gradual progress wins every single time. So I thought I would start by giving you a little bit of background information on myself. This is a picture of myself and my wife taken actually just a couple years ago. Both of us are behavior analysts. And our story actually began over 25 years ago when Jennifer, who was at the time my girlfriend, had a friend whose kid was diagnosed with autism. And she decided that she was going to help this family with this program that was in behavior analysis, applied behavior analysis. And the family at the time, back in the 1990s, there weren't centers in Indiana or anything like that. The family was finding people to come and do the therapy, and they needed extra help. So Jennifer told me, hey, you're going to do this too. And of course, I was madly in love. So I said, whatever it is that you want. So we both got involved in applied behavior analysis back in the late 1990s. And initially, my wife went on and said that she wanted to do this for her career. So she got hooked up with the Lovaas Institute, and Dr. Lovaas did a lot of the original research with children with autism and intensive programs. And then I kind of came along as her sidekick and started to fall in love with it as much as her. And ultimately, we both ended up back here in Indianapolis. We both work now for the Applied Behavior Center for Autism. And along the way, we, of course, decided that we wanted to start a family. So initially, we ended up with a boy. And then a couple of years later, we ended up having another boy. And we always had thought, you know, maybe we would go for 3 kids, but we had 2 boys. It was a lot of work. Being a parent is incredibly difficult. I came to learn, but after about 5 more years, we said, you know what? Let's go ahead and try one more time for a kid. We don't really care if we end up with another boy. We know how to do boys. If we end up with a girl, that is perfectly fine too. And so, of course, we ended up with a boy and another boy, twins. Did not see that coming. Long story short, that was quite a while ago. In fact, that was over 25 years ago. My wife and I have been behavior analysts for over 25 years. And we also have kids that have grown up and have gotten much older. And that kind of start for me is to kind of make a couple points to you all. First of all, I do have kids. I do know what it's like to be a parent. I don't have a child with autism, so I can't completely relate to what you're going through or your family life. I totally get that. I'm going to give you some examples from the children that I've worked with in clinic and home settings, but I also understand that that's completely different than like actually being in the home every single day. So I get my analogies will sometimes hit and sometimes miss. I think if they do resonate with you, they will because of the universal values and principles that kind of underlie what I'm hoping to talk about here with you all today. One of the final things I just wanted to point out, because speaking of universal values, we're going to watch the youngest 2 kids over there in the cross-country uniforms. They're going to go and do this first video for me to kind of give you an example of what this presentation is all about. And you will notice that one of the twins is missing one arm. He's perfectly fine. He's learned to do everything just like people with 2 arms. In fact, it's made it very easy for us to tell them apart. And I kind of appreciate that since they're identical twins. All right. With that being said, here's the first video to give you this idea of what I'm thinking about when it comes to this idea of the hot and cold game and making progress gradually. If you've never heard of the hot and cold game before, you'll learn about it right here. It's basically where generally speaking, when you're trying to get someone to touch something, you'll say warmer, warmer, warmer till they touch what you want them to touch, and you say colder if they're not near what you want them to touch. But this is going to be two variations to that game that kind of go along with what happens in everyday life. So here we go.
All right, for this game, he's got to touch something in this kitchen. I'm going to try and get him to touch this faucet handle right here. So this is the warm and cold game. All I'm going to do is I'm going to say warm and warmer. There's something on this side of the kitchen that you need to touch. And when you touch it, we're just going to see how many seconds it takes you to do it, right? I'll just basically say warm and warmer till you get it. Does it make sense? All right, ready, set, go. Warm. 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 Warmer. 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 Warm. Warmer. 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 Warm. Warmer. Warmer. Warm. Warmer. Hot. So this is the warm and cold game. I'm simply going to say warm, warmer, or cold, and you touch things. It's on this side of the kitchen, and we'll see how long it takes you to get it. Ready, okay, set, go. Cold, 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 wow, so cold, 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 warm, cold, 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 cold.
All right. Think about those two different versions that you saw, because it's going to play a role in exactly what we're going to talk about here for the rest of the time period. And I'll give you a little secret here. What we're about to talk about is not really rocket science. Like, this whole presentation is going to be summed up in the next 5 minutes. So if you have your kids screaming in the other room and they need your help, listen to the next 5 minutes and you're done with what you need to learn. The problem is, it's really easy to say, and it's very hard to implement. In fact, I knew a family one time who was involved in engineering, and they actually like to say a lot of times about behavior analysis that, you know what, a behavior analysis is not rocket science. It's much more difficult, because in rocket science, you're dealing with objects, and in behavior analysis, you're dealing with humans, including yourself. So I'm going to try and give you like lots of examples, but even then, it won't necessarily be easy to immediately implement. Controlling behavior change is hard, and I'm really going to try and give you a sense of how you gradually go about doing these things so that your kids improve in what it is that you want them to improve in. The basic concept is this, and in behavior analysis, we call it shaping. It's simply this: if you make small changes to help a child learn, you'll get where you're going better than if you try for an all or nothing approach. You want to reward gradual changes until your child reaches the goal. And again, if you go back to the two examples that I just showed, the first kid, who was Trent, when you do this kind of warmer thing where you kind of help them along the way, you gradually get where you're going. If you only expect that you're going to reinforce and reward when you're getting exactly what you're like hoping to get in the future, sometimes you'll never get that. And if you wait for that in the distant future thing to reward that behavior, it can take a long time to get there. Your kid starts going in circles. So we're going to look today at a variety of different ways that this idea of making small changes to help a child learn has been really successful when helping individuals with autism, and how it is that you can reward those gradual changes until your child reaches the goal. Again, the general insight here is small changes can lead to a great impact. All right. In order to do the shaping, there are basically some 4, I think it is, specific actions. The first is that you identify your final goal. Then you figure out where you're starting. Then you simply pick a point in between that starting and final goal, and you reward that behavior. And most importantly, you have a plan for when things go right or wrong. You recognize that there's going to be a gradual progress to this. Here's our first example. It's about eating. So one of the issues we know is that there are children with autism that don't like to eat a lot of different things. And there's a lot of different strategies that can be used to make this to help kids learn to eat. But one in particular deals with shaping that I think is a really neat kind of setup. And so Dr. Abby Hodges, yeah, sorry, can't see the other screen. Yes, Dr. Abby Hodges did this one study. In fact, that's a picture of her there. And what she's going to try and do is increase foods consumed by children using this kind of shaping procedure. And so what they did was they said, okay, let's look at 3 different levels. Instead of just expecting a kid to eat and rewarding them for eating the food, let's start with there's kids that are just totally refusing to eat the food. And all we want them to do first is touch the food to their lips. And if they touch the food to their lips, we will go wild with excitement. We'll do something that they really like. We'll give them another food that they like to eat. We'll give them their favorite toy. We'll do something amazing just for touching the food to their lips. That's all they have to do in the study. And then once they're doing that, the next step is we'll say, well, now you have to put it in your mouth, but you don't have to swallow it. Put it out in your mouth. You can spit it out. That's perfectly fine. And again, we'll give you the most amazing thing in the world to reward you for making that next step. And then once kids are used to touching the food to their lips and kind of actually smelling it at the same time, and then also used to putting it in their mouth and at least having it in there so they get used to the texture and the feel and the taste of it, then we'll actually work on chewing and swallowing that piece of food. And lo and behold, when they took this approach, they got amazing results with the kids that they worked with. The kids actually went from foods that they completely refused to eat to actually swallowing the food. Well, here's the thing. In practice, we've taken this kind of format and we've said, you know what? This is a great starting point, but sometimes just getting the kids to touch the food to their lips can be a really hard thing for a kid to do. And what we've learned is, you know what, really those 4 things can be broken down even further into a wide variety of things. And so we'll look at if a kid is totally refusing to eat a food, can we simply get it so that they will eat the food they like with the other food that they don't like at least present at the table? And we will reinforce them for doing that. We will reward the heck out of that again, in whatever way, shape, or form that makes that kid super happy. And then instead of having them actually put the touch the food to their lips, we'll simply have them touch the food with their finger. We'll have them pick up the food. We'll reward them for touching the food to their cheek rather than their lips. We'll reward them for smelling the food. And then you finally get to touching the food on their lips. You can then do things where you're wiping food across your lips, touching the food to your tongue, wiping the food on your tongue, putting it in your mouth but not swallowing, putting it in your mouth for 5 seconds, so it's a longer period of time, chewing and spitting into a napkin, swallowing, and then gradually eating a number of bites until you get to a regular portion. And there you go. You have something where you want a kid to learn to eat a new food, where you're saying, instead of just saying, well, I need you to eat this and then I'll reward you for it, you look at ways to break it down and gradually shape it so that you get what it is that you're looking for. One of the things to keep in mind in all of this, in terms of like, what do you not want to miss, and I've tried to say the word over and over again, is you need to remember what the incentive is for your kid to actually do the new behavior. We all need some motivation to try new things. And so when we talk about motivation, it really can be anything that's given immediately after the behavior that motivates your kids to do it again. And we try to be as creative as possible to find what's going to work best for that kid. Is it eating another preferred food? Is it having their favorite toy? Is it getting to play with tablets or watch a video? Is it simply hugs and praise? Is it listening to their favorite song? Is it natural consequences that actually they do like the food that they're learning to eat? They're just not used to having it. Really, it's anything that's given immediately that helps with this shaping process. And so it's really important that you remember in this shaping format that not only are you trying to break down skills, but each skill that you want the kid to do, that you're rewarding them for actually doing it. All right, let's go on to another example. Sleeping is another issue, obviously, for a lot of kids in terms of their bedtime routines and not falling asleep quickly. So there have been a lot of different studies and procedures that have been studied in terms of how it is that you get to sleep more. I'm going to focus in particular on one aspect that includes shaping, because I think it's just a mind-blowing way to look at how it is that these things take place. So first of all, when this study was started, it was this idea that bedtime routines can help children fall asleep because it gets them into the routine of doing exactly the same thing right before their head hits the pillow and they're supposed to fall asleep. And so the routine that has been, one of the routines, I should say, that has been studied and used before is this idea that if you want to get your kid kind of doing things right before bed in a consistent way, you start a 30-minute routine before bed. And you do some sleep readiness activities, dressing, washing, story time. They have to be things that your kid, that don't cause your kid distress. They should be things that make for a nice bedtime routine. You keep the order and timing the same every night. You avoid activities that create challenging behavior. So if your kid doesn't like to listen to stories, don't do story time, for example. They do say screen time should be avoided, and this is one that's suggested. I do continue to find it interesting how you balance number 4 and number 5 for some kids, not creating challenging behavior, but also avoiding the screen time. But that is definitely the recommendation. And finally, do not extend the routine. It's not supposed to be one more turn, 1 more minute, or something like that. But the idea is that you get these 30 minutes of a routine to help your kid get used to, we always do these things and then we go to bed. Well, that sounds great in theory. And I should mention, so Durand is the, he's the sleep guru, to be honest. If you really want some ideas on how you help with bedtime routines, there's a book by Durand right here. It's been written in 1998 that it's called Sleep Better. And it will gives lots of different ideas for what to do. This is just one of the ideas, this bedtime routine, and then the shaping procedure that we're going to talk about. And so I highly recommend it. The bedtime routine is a great idea. However, the thing that to keep in mind is that the way this bedtime routine is supposed to work is you do the routine, and then the kid goes to their bed and they fall asleep within about 10 minutes. And as I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised, this doesn't always work by adding the routine that all of a sudden the kid's going to fall asleep. In fact, and there's a number of different ways that you can overcome that in terms of other procedures that you're using, but we're going to talk about the shaping procedure. With the shaping procedure, what the idea was is to say, well, what we need to do is we need to do the sleeping routine right before the time the kid typically falls asleep. And so parents for a week to 2 weeks will keep data on what time did my kid actually fall asleep. And whatever that time is, the initial bedtime is 30 minutes after that time. So let's say, for example, that this kid typically falls asleep at 10 o'clock. The kid's bedtime at the beginning of this sleep intervention is bumped up to 10:30. At 10 o'clock, they do the routine. And if you think about it, what's happening here is the kid is sleepy. They usually are asleep by 10 o'clock. So you're doing the bedtime routine while the kid's already sleepy, so that hopefully by 10:30, the kid lays down, and within about 10 minutes, the kid is asleep. If that happens over 2 to 3 days, then the time is decreased. Oops, something happened there. Let me see this again. When that happens, the time is decreased by 15 minutes. And if the kid is successful again for 2 to 3 days, the time is decreased again by 15 minutes. And again, the same thing happens over and over. But if you reach a time period like 9:45 and the kid is now staying up for like 20 minutes, you actually increase again back to 15 minutes. You increase by 30 minutes. So now you're back up to 10 to 15. And this is like that hot and cold game where, remember, there are going to be times when the kid is doing really well and you think you know where you're going. But if things are going differently, you're going to adjust to it. And then you're going to gradually start to go back down again until you can reach the bedtime that you're actually looking for at 8:30. And while it's a long process, they found that this shaping process worked very well for some children where other interventions had not been as popular. And there is the potential for less of the crying episodes that you get with other procedures. There's a less distress from the kid because the kid's so tired to begin with. And so here's a picture of Dr. Delamere, who did one of those studies showing that this kind of shaping or bedtime fading procedure with the routines was helpful in kids learning to go to bed on time. One of the things I wanted to remind you one more time again then is that this refinement of, we're talking about, is your plan flexible? It's simply the case that you may need to take what's sometimes called taking a step backward, but I would have you rethink that idea. There's really no such thing as taking a step backward in shaping. It's really about looking at things from a different perspective. It's like taking a road less traveled. It's like finding a new road. It's getting where you want to go and being flexible enough to realize, I don't have to do it the way I thought it was going to go. There might be other ways to actually accomplish this. One of the analogies that's used a lot of the times is that it's like the queen sacrifice in chess. Sacrificing the queen was seen as a shocker at the beginning, but when you sacrifice the queen sometimes, which would seem like the most absurd move because you lose your most important piece, well, it actually leads to you winning the game. And if you remember with my first kid, Trent, that we showed on the video, there's this moment where he goes around the table and part of me could be like, oh no, we're so far away from what it is we're trying to do. He's going to the opposite side of the table. This is a step backward, but it's not really a step backward. It's just a different way. It's a different road. And you say, well, how can I reinforce where we are now to finally get us to where we need to go? You have to be very flexible in your shaping plan because you're always simply looking for what's the next step in getting me to where it is that I actually want to go. Let's talk about crying and communication. Let's see. Dr. Gamagami did a study looking at functional communication. So communication that deals with requesting really is what they were looking at, and how it is that they could focus on kids getting better requesting skills even when there's crying involved. Because one of the really difficult things, of course, when kids really want something and they can't communicate it, is that they're going to be distressed. And there's sometimes this concern of saying, well, if the kid is crying and requesting, I don't want to like reward that crying behavior. So now I have to wait till the crying is all gone. But if you do it from a shaping perspective and you think about the gradual steps you're trying to make, this isn't actually the case. And this is the study that they did. They said, okay, rather than saying we're going to teach this kid, you have to request for things, and oh, by the way, you have to do it in a really complex way by getting my attention and saying, please, can I have this? Or even a less complex way of saying, I want this. We're gonna take it step by step from where you're at and gradually get you to our goal. So if right now you're crying when you want things, our first step is to be, it's okay if you cry. We just want you to request as well. So you cry as much as you need to, but just tell us what you need in some way. And they focused on the term, the kid just saying, my way, please, is what they had the kid say. And then the kid got to do what it is that they wanted to do. And then you move on to requesting without crying. And then they moved on to the kid having to gain the other person's attention and request without the crying. And then getting their attention and pausing so that they could make sure that the other person was paying attention to them, and then requesting and no crying. But they basically, again, did this shaping process of gradually getting where it is that they wanted to go. To give you an idea of what the final step should look like, I'm going to show you a short Reels or TikTok video that recently came up on my feed, and I was laughing because I was getting ready for this presentation at the same time. This is an example of like what it looks like in the end. Again, this is not kids with autism. This is just a video that was shown. You'll see the long communication they're looking for, but you'll notice this is not the way that you should actually go about responding to that behavior. So here we go.
Please have the red. Say it slowly like that.
Callie, can I have the red?
You have to put a please in there.
Please,
Can I have the red?
yeah, please
So there you go. Don't end that way. No, she's supposed to get it after doing all that hard work. But, you know, I like this video because it reminds me, like, even for myself, when I think, well, I'm just trying to teach this kid who has never said before, I want the ball or something like that. Like, that can be a lot of work for some kids that they have to do. And so honestly, what we really think about is not only do those 4 steps that were mentioned make sense to us, but we think again that it's possible to break it down even further, that you might start when it comes to communication and you want to shape this behavior so a kid's learning to request in different ways, that if a kid is crying, the first thing you're teaching them to do is simply to point at what they want. And you don't care if they're crying at the same time. As long as they're pointing, you reward them with what they're getting. So they're starting to recognize this is helpful. This is getting me warmer and warmer along the way to what it is that I want. So it's pointing at what you want, saying something with one word, saying one word in a regular volume sometimes is something that you work on, because the kid might be yelling it in the beginning because they're still distressed still. Then getting a fuller sentence, maybe some less crying with the fuller sentence. And then moving on to no crying with a longer response. Again, a whole shaping process that you can use. And so one of the points that we like to talk about with shaping when it comes to things like requesting and sleeping and eating and anything else that we're going to talk about here is that one of the things we need to continue to think about is if our current goal is actually possible. Because a lot of times we sometimes assume that because we've seen something once that it should be something that's possible now for our kids to do. But actually, it might not be time yet for them to actually be able to do it on a consistent level, and that we really still need to be rewarding behaviors that are occurring a little bit lower than the highest that we've seen. Like, we really need to look carefully if we've seen a behavior before and in what circumstances we've seen it, because sometimes we treat it as if a kid won't do something when in fact the kid really can't do something. It's all the particulars in the moment that are important. And one of the analogies that is used a lot of times, or sometimes with this that I like, is the analogy of what it takes to be a gymnast. So let's talk about Simone Biles, who recently did this amazing Yurchenko double pike, which is now called the Biles 2 because she actually completed it. Well, the routine requires the following. You start with a round off entry onto a springboard. You then do a back handspring onto the vaulting table, and then you do 2 flips, right? So this is what a Yurchenko double pike looks like. And I can go through and explain these steps to you in excruciating detail. But for me then to say, okay, you should be able to do it is obviously not the case. You can't do it. I could even go a step further and say, here, watch it. This is what it looks like. All right, so there you go. Now you've seen it, and now I've told you how to do it, but is it realistic for me to say, well, now you should actually be able to do it? Well, sometimes I think when we see a kid crying and we say things like, use your words, because we say, well, I've seen you use your words before, so obviously you should be using your words right now. Sometimes I wonder if that us thinking that's a won't do is really a can't do, that for whatever reason, the situation at the moment just makes it more difficult for the kid to actually use their words. And so where we apply what we can do to someone else, it matters for us to really think carefully about, is our expectation at the moment something that we think is truly possible for this kid and highly likely to do? Because if that's the behavior that you're looking to reward right now, and then you're going to gradually move on from there, that's going to build you up for success over and over again. Let's look at one more example from kids with autism that I think will blow your mind. This is the whole work refusal situation. So of course, we have kids all the time who you tell them they're supposed to do something and they just don't want to do it. And when they don't want to do it, it can lead to lots and lots of different kinds of behaviors. They might tell you no, they might scream, they might try to hit you. There's lots of different ways that kids can let us know that they don't want to do the work that we want them to do. So what this study kind of focused on was, how is it that you go about trying to get a kid to do more work, but possibly shaping that behavior up in a gradual way? Now, of course, I'm sure you would be familiar with, or this makes sense to you, that you say, okay, well, I'll just increase the amount of work that the kid has to do. So I'm just going to have the kid do one thing. I'll make it something easy that I know the kid can do, and I will reward him highly for doing that. And once I am able to do that, I'll move on to 2 things. Maybe I'll even throw in a token board so he sees, see you do these 2 things, and ta-da, you're done, and you get all this amazing other things and that sort of stuff. And I'll kind of gradually build up like that. This is what this study did that I just showed you a second ago, is kind of gradually build up in terms of work refusal. Okay, no big deal. But here is the kind of amazing part. They said, you know, rather than say, you either do it and you get rewarded, or you don't do it and you don't get rewarded, let's instead just make a difference in the amount of reward that you get. And the reason that they did this is because the kids they were working with were actually engaging in property destruction. They would break things or throw things if they didn't want to do the work. And so what they said is the following. Okay, if the kid follows the instructions, we're going to give them a 2-minute break. If they show signs of property destruction, so they pick something up like they're going to throw it or act like they're going to throw it, we'll immediately tell them, never mind, you can just take a 30-second break. So they'll give them a 30-second break, and then we'll come back and repeat the instruction again. Do it, you get 2 minutes. Don't do it, you get 30 seconds. And they also tried it in terms of the type of reward you get. So they said, do it, you get 30 seconds with your favorite toy. Don't do it and you just get your 30 seconds. You can do whatever you want, but you don't get your favorite toys. Those are being kind of set aside and used for when you actually are rewarded for doing the things that you want to do. And lo and behold, both of these situations worked. Changing the amount of the award and changing the type of reward actually increased still the kids from doing 1 to 2 to 4 to 20 instructions that were requested of them. And the refinement here that we often talk about is a reminder that shaping doesn't have to be all or nothing. That doesn't have to be the mindset that you're in. When you have an all or nothing mindset, you start to get into the situation that we had with poor Cliff here, where he starts going around in circles, because all I'm telling him right now is no, 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 cold, 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 cold. There's no warm or warmer whatsoever. There's no progress for him because I'm waiting for him to do something, but I have no idea when he's going to actually do the behavior I want. And I'm not like helping him get there in any way, shape, or form. All or nothing thinking is something that's a popular topic right now, in terms of this being the way to live your own life. Is not to say things like, I ate a cupcake and I ruined my diet, or I had a bad thought and I must be a bad person, or my life is over because such and such happened. This all or nothing mentality can really work against having progress occur, because you get stuck in these ruts. And so what we're trying to do with this shaping process is simply find the next behavior that gets us towards the progress to use. Now let's talk a moment about when you do want to use a shaping procedure versus when you don't want to use a shaping procedure. My wife thought this might be a good image for me to use in terms of what it looks like most of the time when I'm looking for anything around the house. Well, when I'm looking for anything around the house, it may or may not be a good time to use a shaping procedure. You actually can start by asking yourself, well, is telling someone enough, or is showing them enough? Because it may be the case that you have a kid that understands what you really need and want for them to do. And if that's the case, you may not need as much of a shaping procedure. You may be able to just tell them. And if that's enough for them to then do what it is that you're asking them to do, that might be the way to go. Or you might be able to show them, model what it is that you need, and then have them do it. But what you have to keep in mind is you also have to keep in mind how likely is the behavior to occur compared to all the other ones that have been practiced or could be practiced in life? Because this is kind of an analogy that I really like when it comes to the behaviors that we engage in and how things happen. You can think of all of the behaviors as we do as kind of bubbles in a cauldron. And these bubbles are gradually moving towards the top, trying to be the behavior that we exhibit. Well, only one bubble makes it to the top and pops first. That's the behavior that you actually do. There's all these things you might do. There's one behavior that you actually end up doing. And the question is, which bubbles are closer to the top and which bubbles are closer to the bottom? The bubbles that are closer to the top are the things that you already do because that's been your experience and that's what you've been rewarded for, and that's how you've already been shaped. So if your kid, if their first inclination when they have work that they need to do is to say no, or their first inclination when they want to have something that they're requesting and they don't know how is to start crying, well, that means those are the bubbles that are really close to the surface. The bubbles we want, the requesting that we want, the following the instructions that we're giving them, the going to bed on time that we want, those are bubbles like really low towards the bottom of the cauldron. And we need to get those bubbles to gradually move towards the top. So they're the ones that are more likely to come up and out and pop. And that only happens through a shaping process, or I should say it is more likely to happen through a shaping process. So remember, when you're doing the shaping process, you want to think about what behavior do you want? Where are you starting? What's the first step? And what's the incentive or motivation for doing that? That is the key to shaping. You then follow up by asking yourself, well, what happens if you don't do it? What is your plan? Where can you go if it doesn't work? Okay. I'm going to end by just giving you some thoughts and another resource that for yourself might be good to look at, which is called the Atomic Habits book. And it's by James Clear. And this is actually a book about shaping your own behavior. He talks about habits being formed through what he calls a process of 4 parts: cues, cravings, responses, and rewards. And he breaks that down to saying, when you want to create a habit, you have to make it obvious, you have to make it attractive, you have to make it easy, and you have to make it satisfying. Okay. Well, the question is, if you actually want to put some of the things into practice that I'm talking about here, and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I want to shape behaviors with my kids more. Well, I get it's still not easy to do because this is a behavior you have to change in yourself. And one of the best ways to change your own behavior is also through a shaping process. You might think of, you know what, if I really want to do things a little bit different with my kid in the coming days and weeks and months and years, I simply need to start by either making it obvious, making it attractive, making it easy, or making it satisfied. So making it obvious. If you simply take the step to say, I'm going to add to my to-do list to come up with a plan for this behavior that I want to change, this goal that I have for my kid, and I'm going to break it down into parts. That would be making it obvious. You could set a cell phone reminder. You could put a chart up in your home. You could make a Post-it note for yourself. You could put an object out on the kitchen table as a reminder of, oh yeah, I'm going to focus on doing a shaping process with my kids. You can make it attractive by telling your family and friends about it, or joining a Facebook group where they're all into gradual change. You can make it easy by taking small steps so that you're focused on it being more successful than there being failure. And you can make it satisfying by saying to yourself, what's the smallest change that will make the biggest impact in my kid's life and in my life? What is it that if I just did this little bit and we focused on this, what would be a nice small change that could have a lasting impact? And if all else fails, there's also reinforcing yourself with wine. All right. Remember, shaping is about making small changes to help a child learn. It's rewarding gradual changes until your child reaches the goal. You are looking to say there are multiple ways to get to the same result. And how is it that we put everything together to actually get from where we are now in the beginning to the end? Some other aspects we won't talk about simply because of the time, but the other things that can come into play here are also to what extent you give your child a choice about the path that they're taking, how important the skill is right now versus in the future, remembering that progress takes time. This is not something that you're looking to fix in a day. There are professionals out there who have done these kinds of things. Obviously, I'm going to push for behavior analysts, not that I'm biased, but we really are supposed to know how to break down skills. And if you find the right behavior analyst who has experience with the type of kid that you actually have at home, this can be a helpful way to come up with ideas for how to do it. It is all about practice. Practice for everybody is how it is that you get better. And of course, give yourself grace, which is to say, you won't necessarily immediately do what it is that you have done. Oops, sorry. You won't necessarily get shaping to work the first time that you try and do it. Or you might pick goals that are farther than they needs to be, or you might have failure along the way. But that's okay. That's all part of life. We never do everything perfectly step by step. It's about looking at it one day at a time. It's okay to not have everything perfect right now. What it's about is simply finding the next thing that's going to be helpful to make changes in your life and in your child's life. And that's why gradual progress wins.